Close your eyes, dear listener. Let the noise of the day melt away. Allow each breath to slow like a soft breeze drifting through ancient ruins. Tonight, we set sail to Theft of the Mona Lisa, a tale of shadows and secrets.
Paris, 1911. The city thrummed with modern life. Carriages rattled against cobblestones, motor cars sputtered along the boulevards, and the Seine shimmered beneath bridges where poets lingered in the shadows. At the heart of it all stood the Louvre, the great museum of France, a fortress of art and memory. Its halls housed centuries of triumphs and tragedies, and none shone brighter nor whispered more mysteriously than the Mona Lisa. She did not hang in grandeur. Not yet. In 1911, La Joconde, as the French called her, rested in a modest frame behind simple glass, not yet the armored vault she would one day require. Visitors paused before her, some admiring, others dismissing. But those who lingered, truly lingered, often found themselves unsettled. Her smile was not merely a smile, it was a puzzle, a key, a shadow of something greater than human hands alone could have painted.
For centuries, rumors had circulated. Some claimed Leonardo da Vinci painted her with the precision of an alchemist, blending pigments with secret ingredients, crushed lapis infused with stardust, oils stirred with tinctures known only to initiates of lost orders. Others whispered that the painting contained invisible writing, words inscribed in layers beneath the surface, letters only revealed by moonlight or fire. There were those who believed that behind her gaze lay knowledge from Atlantis, a civilization Leonardo himself had glimpsed through forbidden manuscripts smuggled from the East.
And there were darker tales still. It was said that Lisa del Giocondo, the Florentine merchant's wife, whose likeness Leonardo captured, had never truly left the painting, that her soul had been trapped within those pigments, bound by an artist who was less man than magician. Travelers swore the eyes followed them, not in the innocent way of painted portraits, but with living awareness, as though Lisa waited for something, or someone.
By 1911, these stories had become more than idle gossip. In certain circles of Paris, in the smoky cafes where mystics, anarchists, and poets gathered, there were whispers that the painting was not merely art, but prophecy. That the Mona Lisa carried within her smile a secret code, foretelling upheaval, the fall of empires, the rise of nations, and the promise of immortality. The Louvre's curators dismissed such notions, of course. To them, it was simply a Renaissance masterpiece, beautiful but static. Yet in back rooms, behind locked doors, a handful of archivists guarded yellowed manuscripts, hinting otherwise. One bore Leonardo's own hand, a fragment torn from his notebooks. She is the door. She is the silence between words. Guard her well, for when she departs, the world shall tremble. It was on an August evening that Vincenzo Perugia, an Italian handyman working at the Louvre, passed through the halls after hours. His role was menial: glasswork, frames, maintenance. Few noticed him, fewer still remembered his name. But Perugia noticed everything. His gaze often returned to the Mona Lisa, not with the idle glance of a laborer, but with the intensity of one who believed he was destined. To others, Perugia seemed unremarkable, yet within him burned a conviction he never confessed aloud, that the Mona Lisa was not France's to keep. To him, she was Italian blood, Italian genius, Italian soul, stolen by Napoleon's men centuries earlier and paraded in a foreign land. He believed he had a duty, almost holy, to return her home. But there was more than patriotism in his heart. One evening, in a Montmartre cafe lit by smoky lamps, Perugia had sat across from an old man, a scholar, or perhaps a madman. The stranger's eyes glittered with the fever of hidden knowledge. Over wine, he told Perugia a tale. "That painting," he whispered, "is not merely a portrait. Leonardo was no mere painter. He was an initiate. In her smile is written a prophecy, a map, a secret that men have killed to protect. Do you think it coincidence that she survived wars, revolutions, thefts? No, signore. She is protected, and she waits for one who believes." Perugia had laughed at first, but the words clung to him. In the nights that followed, as he passed through the halls of the Louvre, he began to feel the truth of it. Standing before her, he swore her eyes deepened, her smile shifted, as though she acknowledged him. The prophecy haunted him. When she departs, the world shall tremble.
But the story of the Mona Lisa did not begin with Perugia, nor even with Leonardo's brush. Long before the Renaissance, legends spoke of a goddess whose face could not be captured, for to look upon her was to lose all sense of time. She was called Mona, the lady, in some tongues. In others, she was known as Al-Uza, the shining one. Ancient scribes said her worship was forbidden, for her smile promised eternity, but demanded the soul as payment. When Leonardo traveled across Italy and France, he had access to manuscripts hidden in monasteries, relics carried from Byzantium and beyond. Among them, some whispered, he discovered fragments of this goddess's worship, invocations, drawings, and a single phrase in Greek, "She shall smile, and men shall bow." And so when he painted Lisa, did he capture merely a woman, or did he weave into her likeness the shadow of this timeless goddess? Some swore the painting was alive because Leonardo had merged mortal flesh with divine archetype, that Lisa's face was not Lisa's alone, but the eternal feminine, the unknowable smile of destiny itself. By the summer of 1911, the Louvre bustled with tourists. Yet certain staff spoke in hushed tones of strange events. Guards claimed the Mona Lisa's frame grew warm at night, as though touched by unseen hands. A janitor swore he heard laughter, soft, feminine, echoing from her corner when no one was near. One archivist, pale and trembling, resigned after claiming that while cleaning the frame, he saw letters flicker across the surface of the painting, faint as smoke. He would not repeat what they spelled. And in the streets of Paris, fortune-tellers began murmuring that a great theft was coming, one that would shake the world. Cards showed the figure of a veiled woman, always smiling, always vanishing from the deck before the reading was complete. It was into this atmosphere of myth and unease that Vincenzo Perugia stepped. A simple man, perhaps, or perhaps the chosen one of a prophecy written not in ink but in paint. He did not yet know that his decision would ignite chaos across nations, nor that he would become a ghost in history. All he knew was that the Mona Lisa watched him, and that one day soon he would take her away. The Louvre had stood for centuries as a palace of kings, a fortress of culture, a shrine to the triumph of human genius. Yet within its marble halls, some of its most loyal servants were nearly invisible. Men like Vincenzo Perugia, craftsmen, laborers, hired hands who polished the glass, mended the frames, and carried the weight of history without applause. Vincenzo was not tall, nor did he cut a striking figure. His clothes were plain, his voice unremarkable. To most, he was another Italian immigrant, lost in Parisian crowds. But within him stirred a fire, a conviction that would one day place him at the center of the greatest art crime in history.
Born in Dumenza, near the Italian-Swiss border, Perugia had come to Paris seeking work. He found it in the Louvre's maintenance staff, where his trade, carpentry and glasswork, was put to use protecting masterpieces. He was tasked with crafting display cases, cutting glass sheets, and moving fragile frames. To him, the work was honorable. Yet every time he walked past La Joconde, he felt a tug in his chest, as if invisible threads bound him to her. She was not French. She was Italian, born of Florence, painted by Italy's greatest mind. To see her imprisoned in the Louvre, paraded before foreigners, gnawed at him. At least, that was the story he would one day tell. But the truth, like the painting itself, had layers. One evening, in the crowded quarter of Montmartre, Vincenzo stumbled into a cafe thick with tobacco smoke and revolutionary talk. Artists, mystics, and wanderers filled the room. At the back sat an old man whose eyes gleamed like oil lamps in the dark. "You admire her, don't you?" the stranger asked when Vincenzo sat nearby. "Who?" "The lady," the man replied. "The smiling one, the one who waits." Vincenzo froze. The stranger leaned closer. "They say Leonardo da Vinci was more than a painter. He was a seeker, an initiate of mysteries older than Rome. He poured them into her smile. And you feel it, don't you, that she is calling to be freed." The man introduced himself only as Alessandro. Whether he was a scholar, a charlatan, or something in between, Vincenzo never knew. But his words lodged deep in Vincenzo's mind. Alessandro spoke of secret societies who once guarded Leonardo's legacy, of symbols hidden in notebooks, of maps disguised as art, of a prophecy. "When she departs the Temple of Kings, the world shall tremble and truth shall stir." The words burned into Vincenzo's memory. He began to believe he was chosen, not merely to return the painting to Italy, but to fulfill a destiny.
After that night, Vincenzo's work at the museum grew uncanny. He claimed, years later, that he began hearing faint sounds near the Mona Lisa when no one else was present. A sigh, a rustle of silk. Once, even his own name whispered like a breath. On one occasion, while polishing the frame, he swore her eyes shifted, not in the simple illusion of paint, but with living intention. The smile deepened. He stepped back in terror, yet returned again and again, unable to resist. Colleagues noticed his fixation. Some teased him, others ignored it. But a guard once remarked, "The Italian looks at her as if she's speaking to him."
History tells us Perugia stole the Mona Lisa out of patriotism. He convinced himself she belonged in Italy, that Napoleon had stolen her, that he would be hailed as a hero. But beneath that veneer was something stranger, older. He began to sketch crude maps of the Louvre, marking the guards' rotations. He memorized which door hinges creaked, which corridors echoed, and in the quiet of his lodging, he rehearsed, not for theft alone, but for release. At times, he questioned his sanity.
Was he truly hearing voices, or had Alessandro's stories planted madness in his head? But every time doubt rose, he returned to the Louvre, and the painting's gaze steadied him. The prophecy was clear. She must depart.
It was August 21, 1911, a Monday. The Louvre was closed for maintenance. Workers came and went freely, wearing white smocks that marked them as staff. No one questioned Vincenzo when he entered. He moved like a man in a trance. The halls were hushed, dust motes floating in slanted sunlight. In the Salon Carré, the Mona Lisa waited, smaller than most imagined, yet radiant, magnetic. Vincenzo's hands trembled as he approached. Some say he was alone, but in his later years, when he drank too much wine, he whispered otherwise. He swore a shadow moved with him, guiding his steps, a woman's silhouette, veiled in light, who touched the frame with delicate fingers before vanishing. He lifted the painting from the wall. The weight surprised him, not heavy, yet more than mere wood and canvas, as if the centuries pressed upon it. He carried her into a stairwell, removed the frame, and wrapped the panel in his smock. Then he slipped out through a side door. It took less than 15 minutes.
For 2 days, no one noticed. The Louvre was vast, and maintenance work common. It was only on August 22nd, when a painter arrived to study the masterpiece, that alarm spread. Chaos erupted. The gallery was sealed, the museum closed. Police swarmed, journalists raged, and the world awoke to headlines, "The Mona Lisa stolen!" In cafes across Paris, voices trembled. Some blamed anarchists, others foreign spies. But among mystics and poets, another rumor grew, that the painting had vanished not by theft, but by will, that the lady had chosen to depart.
Meanwhile, Perugia carried the painting through Paris's streets, hidden in a trunk within his modest room. He expected immediate pursuit, yet none came. Days stretched into weeks, weeks into months. In his solitude, he often uncovered the painting, gazing at her by candlelight. Her smile seemed sharper now, knowing. At times he swore she breathed, the faintest rise and fall of chest. Sleep eluded him. Dreams clawed at his mind. He saw Leonardo, robed in shadows, whispering equations and symbols. He saw cities burning, thrones crumbling, oceans rising, and always at the center, her face, calm, eternal. The prophecy rang in his ears. When she departs, the world shall tremble. And indeed, the world trembled.
As weeks turned to months, the theft became legend. Newspapers printed wild theories. Some claimed the Louvre itself had staged the theft for attention. Others insisted German spies had taken it. Occult journals declared the Mona Lisa was a relic of Atlantis, stolen by adepts who needed her for rituals beneath the Seine. In Florence, whispers spread that she would return home, fulfilling destiny. In Paris, fortune-tellers claimed the theft marked the end of the old age and the dawn of something darker. And in his cramped room, Vincenzo clutched the painting, torn between pride and terror. He had taken her, but had he stolen the Mona Lisa? Or had she stolen him? Paris awoke on the morning of August 22, 1911, to silence. The kind of silence that descends just before panic. Word spread quickly through the corridors of the Louvre, then into the streets. The Mona Lisa was gone. At first, disbelief. Surely she had been moved for cleaning or for study. Perhaps another gallery had requested her. Yet as the hours passed, disbelief curdled into dread. The painting had vanished without trace. By noon, the Louvre closed its doors, guards sealing off corridors as investigators poured in. The mighty fortress of art had been breached. A piece of the Renaissance, of Leonardo's own hand, had slipped into shadow. The newspapers were merciless. Mona Lisa stolen, national treasure lost, Louvre humiliated, where is Da Vinci's masterpiece? Crowds gathered outside the museum, demanding answers. Some wept openly, others raged against the authorities. The Mona Lisa had been admired, but her disappearance transformed her into an obsession. Mystics whispered in cafes that France had been cursed. Was this not a sign? Empires already strained under unrest. Revolutions simmered, alliances cracked, whispers of war drifted on the horizon. And now the lady had left her post, her silent smile no longer guarding the Salon Carré. One poet cried in the street, "The smile is gone, the century is lost."
Rumors festered like wounds. Some claimed they had seen a woman in white drifting through the halls of the Louvre the night before the theft, her face half hidden, her smile unmistakable. Others swore the painting had vanished of its own accord, that Da Vinci had painted it with pigments from fallen stars, and when the time came, the stars had reclaimed it. In the occult salons of Montparnasse, mediums reported strange visions. A seer named Madame Renier declared during a séance that she had spoken with Lisa herself. "She is free now," the medium gasped, trembling as candles flickered. "She walks again, she smiles upon the world, and nations will fall beneath her gaze." Another mystic claimed the theft marked the awakening of a hidden order, the guardians of the smile, descendants of a brotherhood Leonardo himself had founded. Their task was to keep the secret of the Mona Lisa hidden until humanity was ready. Outside France, the theft became an international sensation. In Italy, the press exploded with pride and suspicion alike. "Her Italian soul has returned," shouted one headline. Others demanded proof, fearing it was but another humiliation. In Germany, whispers tied the theft to spies. In Russia, mystics declared it a sign of approaching apocalypse. In London, the Times wondered whether the painting's absence might forever alter the destiny of art. For everywhere the Mona Lisa had once been regarded as art, now she was myth, a relic, a key, perhaps even a weapon. Back in the Louvre, the empty space on the wall drew pilgrims. The wooden panel that had once borne the painting became, in its own way, a shrine. People stood in silence before it, as though gazing not at absence, but at a ghost. Guards reported odd phenomena in the room. Candles refused to stay lit. Drafts of cold air swept through even on still days. Some claimed they heard faint laughter, soft and mocking, lingering in the gallery. One night, a watchman swore he saw the shadow of a woman standing where the painting once hung. She turned her head toward him, smiled, and vanished into the wall. He resigned the next morning. Meanwhile, Vincenzo Parisia hid the painting in his small Paris apartment, tucked away in a trunk. He expected the police at his door within days, yet weeks passed. No knock came. Instead, the world chased phantoms, anarchists, Germans, art dealers. Even the painter Picasso was briefly accused. The chaos shielded him, but it also weighed on him. At night, unable to resist, he would lift the painting from the trunk and gaze at her. In the flicker of candlelight,
Her smile seemed alive, shifting, deepening. The dreams grew worse. He dreamed of Leonardo's workshop, filled with machines that moved without touch. He dreamed of temples collapsing into the sea, of golden libraries burning, of a woman's voice whispering in tongues he did not know, yet somehow understood. Always the smile, always the eyes. Sometimes he woke gasping, his chest heavy, as if the painting itself pressed down upon him. He began to wonder, had he stolen the Mona Lisa, or had she stolen him?
As the months stretched on, the theft gave birth to new legends. In Florence, some claimed monks had hidden the painting in a secret chapel where her smile guarded relics of ancient saints. In Paris, others insisted she had been smuggled into the catacombs, her face glowing in eternal darkness among the bones. A more chilling tale claimed that each night the Mona Lisa appeared in the dreams of certain men and women, calling them to her, binding them with her smile. Psychologists debated her power. Was the hysteria proof of mass delusion, or evidence of something deeper, that Leonardo had indeed painted a fragment of universal truth into her face, a truth humanity was never meant to bear? As the months turned into a year, the absence itself became a presence. Painters lamented, poets despaired. Some claimed the theft had ushered in a shadow over Europe. Crops failed, strikes spread, governments toppled. In 1912, when the Titanic sank, a handful of mystics muttered that it was connected. The smile had vanished, and so too did fortune. The lady had withdrawn her blessing. For Vincenzo, the guilt gnawed at him. He had wanted to be a hero, to return her to Italy, to stand in glory. Instead, he was a prisoner to a smile. He began to hear whispers, even when awake. "Bring me home." But where was home? To Florence? To Vinci? Or somewhere older still, some hidden temple of forgotten gods? By 1913, 2 years after the theft, the Mona Lisa had ceased to be a painting in the public imagination. She had become a myth, a ghost, a prophecy. Some said she had been burned in a ritual, others that she had been hidden in the Vatican, where popes guarded her secrets. Others still believed that she would never be seen again, that she had slipped beyond the veil of the world entirely, carried into whatever dimension her smile truly belonged. And all the while, Vincenzo sat in his cramped room, staring at the painting in the trunk, her eyes alive, her smile eternal. The world thought she had vanished, but in truth, she was waiting.
For 2 years, the world believed the Mona Lisa lost to shadow. Newspapers speculated, police searched endlessly, and scholars mourned. But the truth was stranger and smaller. She lay hidden in a modest apartment in Paris, wrapped in cloth, confined in a wooden trunk. Vincenzo Perugia lived with her as one lives with a secret too large for a single heart. By day, he worked odd jobs, careful never to draw suspicion. By night, he sat before the trunk, sometimes daring to lift the panel, to look into the face that had driven empires to madness. And in those quiet nights, the journey began, not across borders at first, but across the fragile boundary between history and myth. At first, Vincenzo told himself he was her protector. He whispered that he had saved her from neglect, from French hands that paraded her as a trinket of conquest. He called her Madonna Mia, Signora Lisa, La Dama. But as weeks passed, protector became prisoner. He could not eat without glancing at the trunk. He could not sleep without hearing faint laughter echo in the dark.
More than once, he awoke to find the trunk slightly ajar, though he swore he had locked it. Inside, the painting lay, as always, yet her smile seemed sharper, her eyes more alive. Neighbors began to whisper that Vincenzo looked ill. His face grew gaunt, his eyes shadowed, as though he carried a weight invisible to others. The dreams returned, stronger than before. He saw Leonardo da Vinci, ageless, robed in garments that shimmered like light through water. The master worked at his easel, yet his paints glowed with colors Vincenzo had never seen, hues not of earth, but of stars. "Do you know what you carry?" Leonardo's voice rang in the dream. "She is more than paint. She is a cipher, a vessel, a smile that binds past to future. Guard her, for many seek her, and not all are men." At times Leonardo spoke of Atlantis, a city of towers and glass that sank beneath waves, where the eternal feminine was worshipped in temples of gold. At others he spoke of secret brotherhoods who had sworn to protect her image, to pass it forward until the world was ready. Always the message was the same. Vincenzo was not thief, but chosen. But others knew, or seemed to. One night a knock came at Vincenzo's door. A stranger in a long coat, face shadowed, asked softly, "Do you have her?" Vincenzo stammered denial, but the man's eyes lingered, cold and knowing. He left without a word. Another time, in a marketplace, an old woman pressed a coin into Vincenzo's palm. It bore no mark of the Republic, but the face of a veiled woman smiling. "Guard her well," the woman whispered, then vanished into the crowd. Vincenzo began to believe he was being watched not only by police, but by forces older and stranger. Beyond Vincenzo's small apartment, the world seemed to echo the prophecy. Nations strained under unrest. In the Balkans, violence flared. In France, strikes and protests shook the streets. In Italy, riots spread. Some journalists joked that the missing smile had cursed Europe. Others, less bold, whispered it. "When she departs, the world shall tremble." Vincenzo read these articles with trembling hands. Had he triggered destiny itself? At last, in 1913, Vincenzo resolved to end it. He convinced himself once more that his act was patriotic, that he would return the Mona Lisa to her homeland. He packed her carefully, wrapped in red cloth, hidden in a false bottom of a trunk. Crossing into Italy, he felt a rush of triumph. He imagined parades, medals, songs sung in his honor. Surely Italy would hail him as savior. But the closer he drew to Florence, the heavier the trunk seemed. At night, in his lodgings, he heard footsteps circling his room, though no one was there. Once, while opening the trunk, he swore her eyes shifted toward the window, as if watching someone standing outside. In Florence, Vincenzo sought out an art dealer, Alfredo Geri. Nervous but determined, he revealed the painting, claiming he had rescued her from France, that she belonged in Italy. Geri's eyes widened at the sight. He called in Giovanni Poggi, director of the Uffizi. Together, they examined the panel with trembling reverence. "It is her," Poggi whispered. "It is truly her." For a brief, shining moment, Vincenzo believed his destiny fulfilled. The lady was home, the prophecy complete. But then the air seemed to grow heavy. The smile looked different under Italian light, not joyous, but mocking. The dealers exchanged glances, then calmly told Vincenzo to leave the painting with them for safekeeping. The next morning, police arrived. Perugia was arrested. To the authorities, he was no chosen guardian, no vessel of prophecy. He was a thief. His defense, that he had acted from patriotism, was met with skepticism and ridicule. Yet, in the jail cell that night, he swore he saw her, not the panel, which had been taken from him, but Lisa herself, standing at the foot of his bed, her smile unchanged. "You did as you were meant to. The smile has traveled. The world will tremble." And then she was gone.
In December 1913, after 2 years in hiding, the Mona Lisa returned to the Louvre. Crowds wept with joy. Italy allowed her to visit briefly, displayed with pride in Florence and Rome, before sending her back to France. The world rejoiced, yet something had changed. The Mona Lisa was no longer simply a painting. She was a legend, a survivor of theft and prophecy, her smile more famous than ever before. People traveled from across the globe to see her. Newspapers called her the most famous woman in the world. And among mystics, whispers persisted. She had not been stolen, but awakened. For Vincenzo, the journey ended in disgrace, a short prison sentence, obscurity, poverty. Yet in his final years, he told a different story. To those who would listen, he confessed, "I did not take her. She took me. She smiled, and I obeyed." And in the myths that blossomed around him, he was not merely a thief, but a pawn in a game woven centuries before his birth. For the smile had moved, the prophecy stirred, and the world indeed trembled soon after. The winter of 1913 brought snow to Florence, delicate flakes falling over terracotta roofs and narrow streets. Yet no snowfall could rival the storm of emotion that swept the city when Vincenzo Perugia revealed the Mona Lisa to the art dealers. For 2 years, she had vanished from public view, yet the world had not forgotten her. Italy's pride surged. The Mona Lisa, painted by their Leonardo, had survived theft, secrecy, and legend. She had returned, or so the newspapers declared, to her homeland. Florence celebrated, Rome acknowledged, and the eyes of Europe turned to her as if she were more than paint, more than canvas, more than history. By the end of 1913, the Mona Lisa was transported back to Paris. The Louvre, which had endured ridicule and chaos, restored her to her rightful place, behind protective glass, in a room that would soon become the heart of the museum. Visitors flocked once more, eager to see the smile that had vanished and returned, the eyes that had haunted dreams across nations. Curators called it a victory for art, for law, for reason. Yet for those who had whispered of the myth, the truth remained. The Mona Lisa had always been more than a painting. She had survived. She had traveled. She had chosen her moments of revelation.
Even as newspapers printed the mundane details of her recovery, legends persisted. Some claimed the Mona Lisa's smile had grown sharper in those years, that she now carried knowledge of the shadows she had seen while hidden. Mystics in Paris and Florence spoke of her presence in dreams, appearing to those whose destinies were tied to history,
warning or guiding them. Scholars debated whether Leonardo had encoded symbols in her eyes, geometric patterns, astrological signs, or even messages in invisible ink. The idea that art could carry prophecy, that a smile could bind centuries of secrets, was not mere fantasy for those who had felt the tremor of her absence. The world had indeed trembled, not with the obvious fury of stolen treasure, but with subtle chaos. Markets faltered, political tensions shifted, and the imagination of an entire generation was captivated. Perugia himself faded into obscurity after his brief imprisonment. He served a short sentence and returned to a modest life, largely forgotten by the public, though never by the myth. Yet those who encountered him later spoke of a man changed. His eyes carried a haunted reverence, and he often spoke in half-whispers about the smile, the gaze, and the feeling that the painting had moved him, guided him, and perhaps even judged him. In interviews toward the end of his life, he confessed, "I did not steal her for glory. I took her because she called, and she will always call to those who are meant to hear." Historians dismissed such statements as eccentric, yet the legend persisted.
As decades passed, the Mona Lisa became more than a Renaissance portrait. She became a symbol of mystery, of art's power, of human obsession. Artists copied her, parodied her, dissected her. Philosophers debated the meaning of her smile. Psychologists analyzed it, trying to measure its effect on human perception. Governments invested in her protection, fearful that a second theft might awaken the myth anew. Yet none could capture what Vincenzo had known in his secret nights, that the painting was alive, not in the literal sense, but in the sense of influence. She did not merely exist, she reached into minds and hearts, calling some to action, some to wonder, and some to madness. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of the theft was the realization that a painting could hold more than beauty. It could hold history, myth, and prophecy. The Mona Lisa had traveled beyond Paris, through the hands of a man chosen or cursed, and in doing so had become something greater. The public marveled, yet only a few truly understood. Her smile had been a bridge across time. Secret societies whispered that the lady still carried knowledge of lost civilizations, encoded in the pigment and brushwork of Leonardo's hand. Artists felt her influence, poets heard her in echoes of language, and dreamers saw her in visions. Even the Louvre itself, once merely a repository of art, became a shrine, a place where history and myth coalesced. Visitors sensed that they were not merely seeing a painting, but gazing upon an enigma that had survived centuries, theft, and legend.
Some historians argued that the theft itself had minor but meaningful consequences. Europe in 1911-1913 was already on edge. Political tensions simmered, alliances shifted, and the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand loomed on the horizon. While no one could prove it, occultists and mystics whispered that the absence of the Mona Lisa, the removal of her gaze from the public, had disturbed hidden balances. Perhaps it was coincidence, perhaps the effect of a painting whose smile contained some measure of cosmic truth. Regardless, the world's attention had shifted. Minds that once focused on mundane affairs now pondered mysteries, and imagination itself had become restless, questioning what could lie beyond perception. Though Perugia was forgotten, Some believed that the painting continued to select its guardians. Those who interacted with her, whether curators, restorers, or visitors who lingered too long, sometimes reported strange sensations, sudden chills, glimpses of shadow, or the subtle feeling of being watched. She had returned to her wall, yet her journey had not ended. Her smile, now legendary, continued to whisper through centuries, speaking to those who could listen. Some claimed that the true theft of the Mona Lisa was not by Perugia, but by time and destiny, that she was never merely stolen, but lived, moving through the currents of history, teaching, haunting, and enduring.